The World of RPGs, Episode 5, Turkey. Welcome to The World of RPGs, a podcast in which we travel around the globe to visit the local role-playing game scenes. I'm your host, Mo Bots, and in Episode 5, you're going to Turkey. I am not going because I already live there. Turkey is a country on two continents, Asia and Europe. On the one hand, that's kind of a cliche. On the other hand, I live on the Asian side and I can literally see Europe from my kitchen window. The country has a population of about 85 million people, most of which are Sunni Muslims. The Turkish language uses the Latin alphabet and is from the southwestern branch of the Turkic language family, a group of languages mostly spread across Central Asia. Because of history and the location, modern Turkish has a number of Arabic and Persian vocabulary, but linguistically it's related to neither. Since I live in Istanbul, I have actually met most interviewees in this episode, except the one who recently moved to Berlin, meaning this episode also has the first in-person interview. As always, we begin with one of the voices from the actual play from last episode, and he's also the organizer of the local gaming meetup. So for those in Istanbul, on the last Sunday of a month, when time permits, I'll be at the English-speaking table there.
Hello, I'm Metin. I'm a Turkish tabletop RPG podcaster, previously club president and event organizer. I started playing 10 years ago in my high school. And there was a crazy person there trying to recruit nerds for a crazy game. And I was 14 years old and it was fascinating to me. I was interested in board games a little bit. Actually, there was a Turkish translated D&D board game. And I was very fan of that without knowing what D&D was. So, and yeah, that's how my interest in the hobby started. Then I played ever since. Every free time in my high school, then started to attend Turkish events. Then when I was in the university, I joined the club, then became the president of the club for 3 years. And now have a podcast for 4 years called D12 Macera, which means D12 Adventures, because it's the loneliest dice. We want to claim that name. And we are organizing events for one-shot game names for everybody to have a chance to start this hobby, because in Turkey, there are not a lot of events. Only the university clubs are carrying this hobby. So we wanted to launch an event to everyone to feel welcomed and try different games, different systems, because everyone has to play their first game, right? But it's an anxiety thing because they don't have any experience. They may have a hard time joining a table, hard time starting this hobby, learning the rules. So we trying to mitigate that. I try to highlight not classical systems in the RPGs, but my favorite one is Pathfinder First Edition. I'm in love with that system because I'm an engineer and I love tactical combat and the depth of the character creation and depth of the monsters, rules, mechanics, etc. But other than that, I'm very much in love with Montecook's Numenera. I think it's a fascinating setting and very, very easy to get into. Very light rules. It's a great event game. And a curveball, when in conventions or when I teach someone, not in the they are not a nerd, geek, etc., but they are interested in hobby. One of my favorite system to use is called Dread. Do you know about Dread?
It's the one with the Jenga tower, isn't it?
Yeah. It's very atmospheric. It's very easy to get into. The only rule is when you take a risky action, you pull a Jenga. That's it. If the Jenga tower falls, you die. And modern, I always play one-shots because it's always a one-shot, right? And about modern horror situations. So you don't have to know any sci-fi, know any fantasy. You can just modern setting. There are zombies now. Yeah, that's very easy to get into and very risky situation. And horror is such a atmospheric, that tension just gets you into the game, gets you into the role playing. So I'm in love with the Dread system, even though I can't use it in a live stream through Discord, through web tabletop. It's virtual tabletops, yeah, but I'm in love with that systems. And honorable mentions are Tales from the Loop. I don't know why I very enjoy that system. And Og is like a caveman system. You play as a caveman. You only know 2 to 5 words that you can speak, and you try to role play with that. Such a great game. Such a great convention game. You make silly things. We also make actual plays with our podcast. We have a YouTube channel. We also like weekly try to do 2 live streams, always highlighting different game systems, trying to teach them, trying to show, because like we in Turkey, some systems, some game systems are more known and more famous, but we are trying to highlight, showcase other great systems that this hobby is not only D&D, this hobby is not only the major games. We want to highlight everything. So there will be a game for everyone. And both in our events and in our actual plays, we try to do that. And we are not the only actual play channel, actually. There is like a good friend of ours called FRP Oynuyoruz, which means like we are playing tabletop RPGs kind of thing in Turkish. So they have we do it on Discord. They have a great studio. They make great games. And there are like small channels. There's also one big channel called Attack Roll. And that channel is also very good. And they exclusively run 5th edition narrative-based games. Like they are focused very much on narrative and not focused on mechanics, as you say, but so they are very popular. I think they are one of the biggest actual play channels. Yeah, sometimes small actual play channels pop up and go, but like I think consistency and like making videos for at least 1 year is like a very important thing. We play in Turkish, but always the rule books are in English. And like, that's the funny thing. Like I run Pathfinder Society games for a long time. I have more than 100 games on my back, Pathfinder Society. And the thing is that you become a professional translator because the scenario is in the English. The one shot is in English. You read the description English, you'll simultaneously translate it and talk in Turkish, right? That's one of the things like gave me a lot of practice in English in high school and university. But most of the games we run in Turkish, but I have a chance sometimes when we have a foreign guest, I run some English tables. As for the translation and systems, like there is a fan-made translation of D&D 5th edition. There is an official translation funded and made by a YouTuber called Can Sungur. They translated Fate Condensed System. And Can Sungur is a very important figure in Turkish RPG because in 2011, before he was a YouTuber, they created one of the biggest Turkish one-shot events, game days, called Wizards of Istanbul. So, as I mentioned, we are trying to run an event called D12 Masada, which means D12 on the table. And we are inspired by that event because, like, I started learning the hobby there on 2011. So now it's gone. So we are trying to make similar events. And with that Fate translation, a Turkish publisher called Gordion Games crafted their book, their story, their setting, and published it with the Turkish Fate system. So that's the first and I think only published book. I think there are some amateur tryouts before, but the first published Turkish book was that book. Other than that, we don't have any translations, but we have some Turkish publishers that published English games. There is a Turkish company called Dreamland Storytellers. They are older than the other ones, and they published a Nordic setting for D&D 5th edition called Sviland. Then they continued every year for like last 5 years. They made a Kickstarter for their D&D 5th edition supplements. They published then a book called Corpus Malicious, which is a supplement about handling evil in D&D games. Then they rerun Sviland as a revised edition with a new adventure with the 5 books, like expanded Sviland. Then they made Corpus Angelus, which is the good counterpart of the previously mentioned book. And this year, they kickstarted with a great amount a book called Blood Punk, which is a punk setting focused on weapons and spells powered by the power of blood. They are using blood as ammunition. The artwork looks so cool. Then we have 2 alternative history Turkey settings, not one of them is not Turkish. One is called Historica Arcanum, which is like 18th century, 19th century Istanbul with a magical twist, such a great setting. What I love about them is like they took historical sites in Istanbul and made them actual dungeons in their adventure, like famous places, famous castles, famous towers, etc., are dungeons in the actual game. Such a cool idea. They are called Metis Media. And the last thing is called Coravea Victor, which is a Roman Empire, Byzantium Roman Empire setting. Also set in Istanbul, but before the Turkish came. And it's about a D&D supplement again for arena-based and gladiator aesthetic, but they are also alternative history. So elves are also in this setting, and like magic is also there. So yeah, these are the ones I know of. I hope I'm not missing something that I don't know of, but yeah. For Tales from the Loop, specifically, we set it in Sweden because like such iconic artwork, such iconic city is, right? Yeah. But for the Vampire, I'm not an extensive World of Darkness player. I played some. I also joined the LARP. I had a game that run in Chicago, and I also have a game that was run in Istanbul. So both works. It's up to GM. But I know a project which was before my time a little bit, at the start of the 2000s, two different teams were creating Turkish canon, Turkish history, Anatolian history for the World of Darkness. And they are old game masters. I had a chance to meet with them, and they have such great non-canon stories for Istanbul. They know which antediluvian is resting in Istanbul. They took all the parts from the World of Darkness settings and used them and like localized them for Turkey, even though they are still using the English rule sets. Other than that, this is only a problem in modern settings. So in sci-fi or in fantasy, we just go there. But yeah, in modern settings. And as I mentioned, when I run Dread games, I mentioned the setting just another nameless city in America. Yeah, because it's very easier because the rules are set around that. American cities or Turkish cities are not so different, but some of the elements can change. And playing in your hometown is actually risky. When you say, we are in this hospital, and some player says, there's a warehouse right next to that hospital. I know that. I live next door. I ransack their supplies, things like that. So it's always easier because also the content is based on America. Yeah, there are two different styles. Both of them I saw, but I prefer, I think, running in a nameless American city better. But I don't run also modern games that much. In Turkey, tabletop RPGs is like an alt culture. It was always been an alternative culture, like punk, like metal. Like some places, cosplaying is more mainstream than tabletop RPGs. Board games were also a old culture, but like there are 2-3 now board game publishers that are localizing, translating games in Turkish. So the modern board game culture is becoming more commonplace. But tabletop RPG is like that. It's that kind of a culture for us. So university clubs are the main spread point of this. So when a new student comes to the university and is mesmerized by the club's ideas or club's orientation standards, etc., they join and they learn RPG culture there. So, and like in my university, I tried to do that for 3 years. But also there are now gaming cafes, and we are organizing events on those cafes, and we are promoting them on social media so that anyone who heard about tabletop RPGs want to try them, have a chance to try them. So because with Critical Role, it's also very famous in Turkey. And also some very big computer gaming, PC gaming streamers are sometimes dabbles in tabletop RPG because they are normally play them on their home, but they don't stream it. So when someone streams a tabletop RPG, it does not get all the views they normally get, but they do it. So, and then interest peaks. People want to know about that. People want to try it. So we try to organize events for newcomers in those cafes and promote them on social media so that they have a chance to try it. Yeah, also like things like Stranger Things. Stranger Things is very popular in Turkey. So a lot of people ask me as an event organizer, can I play the thing on the end? I think D&D, it's called D&D. Can I play that? Things like that. So yeah, it's spread from word of mouth, spread through influencers. I think it's same with the America. Yeah, we try to catch the people who are interested in it. Yeah, I very much try to spread this culture in Turkey because, like everywhere, there are geeks in Turkey, and it's a hard thing for us to access these books and these games because both English is a barrier for some of the people, and accessing the books, even the PDFs, are very much pricey in our local currency. So we try to get around that by buying one and using it for the whole group. We are printing the PDFs that we get. Like it's very commonplace to see black and white hand-printed books in Turkey because they bought the PDF and like just printed it in a local printer. The funny thing about Turkey is the culture goes like a sign function. There was a first tabletop gaming cafe I think in 1998 called Sihir Cafe, called Magic Cafe. And around that cafe, there's a generation of tabletop gamers. Then that cafe closed in 2003. Then there's a gap. Then I know because I joined them, like in 2010-ish, there were a lot of university conventions. There were a lot of events, and they ceased to exist in after 3 years. I don't know why. Now my generation is making games, events, the clubs are active again. So we have a dormant times and then again the very active times. I hope this active time stays active with the internet, with the whole global market coming here. The commonplace of PDF format, I think helps a lot because I hear the stories from the older generation that they asked for their relative coming back from Germany a game book, and that game book become an artifact in the gaming group because there's a one book in 1999, for example, one D&D book, and everyone learned from that single copy. 100 people learned from that single book or mouth to mouth. They changed the rules, etc., etc. I think that's very fascinating thing that happened, and now we are here. We are in the internet age, and everyone can access them, and so the hobby is growing, becoming much accessible. And I hope this stays the same. I hope we don't only have 4 publishers. We have like tons and tons of publishers. And I hope to see more Turkish games because the board game industry like got into Board Game Geek, looked at the first 350 games and tried to license as much of them as possible, translated them in English. Some of them has my name as a translator, so they did such a good job. I saw him with my own eyes, like when there's a Turkish material, the hobby spreads around exponentially. Before the translation company joined in Turkey, that board game company, we had the board game culture, but they were import games, hard to get with the foreign currency. You have to ship it. Shipping is always a problem from America, from Germany, from United Kingdom, etc., etc. Now with Turkish, it's become more accessible. So I hope to see more Turkish RPG games. If the community grows, it becomes profitable and some publishers start to translate it. And yeah, that's my hope. It grows. The hobby grows so much that Turkish books become profitable and get published. Let me plug our event because there may be some foreigners listening to this in Turkey and trying to search for non-Turkish resources. So we are called, like I mentioned 2 times before, D12 Macera. It's D12 Macera. You can look us up in any social media. Why I'm mentioning this? Because in our event called D12 Masada, D12 on the table, D12 on the table, we run English games if requested. Like last week in our event, someone sent a registration and mentioned they don't speak Turkish. In our Game Master chat, we asked around who wants to convert their table into English, and one D&D 5th edition table was run in English. So it's very important, like because most of us are university students, etc., etc. It becomes harder for us to run games in English. It's a different thing to speak English, different thing to run games in English, like making descriptions, atmosphere, etc., etc. Sometimes can be hard, but we try. So if requested beforehand, sending a DM on Instagram, on Twitter, sending an email. You can find everything on our social media. We open those games. We try to be welcoming to everybody. So if you are a Turkish player listening to this and finding out about that time, just sign up to any Turkish table. We always do that at the last Sunday of a month. And the registration starts 1 week before Saturday. So that's the resource I want to plug here so that everyone can play. I mentioned our motto is that everyone should start playing games. So
if finding new players is largely dependent on university clubs, let's talk to a member of a student gaming club from a Turkish university. Luckily, I work at a university in Istanbul, so I just asked my own club's president.
I'm Berfin Ceylan from Istanbul, Turkey. I am 21 and the president of Turkish-German University Game Club. I work as a pixel artist in a small game company. I love having the role of creating an environment in which gamers can feel comfortable and organize events that help the community and culture in general. I can describe myself as a beginner at TTRPGs, but really love them. I experience both being GM and player. I have been playing video games for a long time, especially the RPG games which are placed in fantasy universes. I was always eager to take the role of a character in these games, being in an imaginary universe, dealing with monsters, witnessing amazing stories is much more appealing than everyday life in the real world. So, being a tabletop RPG player was inevitable for me. The freedom about shaping the story and entire experience that TTRPGs offer is the reason why I'm into them. Although I'm fairly new at TTRPGs, I'm very passionate about them. I thought starting with the most known system would be the ideal. Dungeons and Dragons is the only system I have tried so far. The fact that its community is huge and they have years of experience in that system is making things much easier for a newcomer like me. I'm very pleased with it, but this doesn't mean I'm not interested in others. I'm so impressed by indie systems with lots of creativity going and really impatient to try them out. I think the most important thing we do as a club about bringing new people into the hobby is showing how many people love this hobby and giving the feeling that these people have an environment where they can feel comfortable. Making them feel like they won't be alone is a great way to welcome them. Our main goal about new people is to make them feel that they have someone to guide them in this very fun but sometimes confusing adventures. The players in our club reflect the player habits in our country as well. Dungeons and Dragons by far the most played games as you can imagine. In addition to the fact that experienced players play D&D, we encourage most newcomers to start with it. There is also a group which prefers playing Fate as well. I have never used any Turkish resource other than community-based websites or videos. I know that official Turkish translations were published for Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 back in 2003, but I haven't heard any further progress on this issue since then. But if there's a Turkish supplement that I don't know about, Turkish players are sure that they have to use English once or know English if they want to play RPGs. Although playing RPGs face to face with my friends would be my favorite, but it is not possible for us to play offline since we are not living in the same cities currently. So we have to play using online virtual tabletops. We have tried Roll20, but then switched to Fantasy Grounds Unity because we can buy rulebooks and adventures much cheaper in Turkey. And we are really pleased with it so far. It has tons of features that are not possible to create in offline games. For example, I really like dynamic lighting. It makes our sessions much more realistic, but I wouldn't change old school pen and paper style gaming for anything. Being behind the cardboard DM screen, feeling dice in your hands, using pencil and eraser to modify your character sheet is what I miss.
Now, this was the young generation who got into role playing games recently, but what was it like in the 1990s? I contacted the founder of the popular website FRP.net.
My name is Kayra Keriküpçü. I'm Turkish, grew up in Turkey, first Izmit and then Istanbul. And then I moved to Berlin 3 years ago, so I am living in Berlin with my family. I got into RPG stuff in 1997. I wasn't reading books a lot, but I was into comics, some cartoons on TV, and then I love mythology and fantasy things on screen, etc. And my friend just gave me the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit books in that year, the English editions, because there was no Turkish editions in that time. And then I spent all my summer holiday for 3 months while in the morning I was reading Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, and at night, every night we were playing Dungeons and Dragons. We were playing the basic edition, and then we switched to second edition, etc. So I got into RPG stuff in 1997, and then it took a lot of time in my life. So I spent so much time reading books, running games, playing games with my friends that I found in these years, because there was very small internet community over IRC or some forum chats, etc. So we found each other, and then we were meeting and playing RPGs. I started the website in 2004. It's the FRPNet website. We were a very small community, so we were talking about our games and about RPG knowledge. We are talking so much, but we were a very small community. We wanted to share our knowledge and our experience for the other people, all in Turkey. So that's why we started this website. We were publishing some articles about tabletop RPGs, and also we were publishing news about the new RPG settings, books, etc. So we were announcing lots of stuff about tabletop RPG. Mostly it's fantasy based, but all about RPG stuff. So, and then it grows a lot. So nowadays it's not only tabletop gaming, not about only RPG. It's all about fantasy genre. It's TV series, movies, books, comics, etc. It's been nearly 19 years, so it still grows up. It was crazy. Oh my god. The hardest part is to find the RPG dice. My first dice I bought, I think, at the end of 1998. Before that, I was using my friend's dice because my friend just got them from Great Britain, and he just gave it to me as a present. I was running the games with that dice, and then I bought my dice over, I don't know, eBay or Amazon or something from internet. But the books also another problem. You couldn't find any printed books, by the way. It was very hard. But when you find a book, you go to a copy shop, and then you copy all the player's handbook, monster manual stuff. So I still have the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons second edition photocopies, player's handbook, monster manual, and DM's guide. So it was very hard to find the books, but we have the copies, and we were running the games, we were playing the games by using that. By the way, we were always running our games in Turkish, but we were just reading the books in English and reading the adventures, supplements, etc. But mostly we were running our games in Turkish. Everybody was talking in Turkish, but of course there were some attempts. So also I was in that community to translate the player's handbook into Turkish. With Arka Bahçe Yayıncılık, they translated the beginner set, Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition beginner set, into Turkish. And also we translated the player's handbook into Turkish. 3rd edition, Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition. And in that time, nearly the same time, Hasbro published Dungeons and Dragons board game into Turkish. There were few, but these are the only ones I remember, And also some of our friends started to write their own systems, like Black Die. My friend Emre Soyak also created a system called Karazar in Turkish. It's Black Die. So there were some attempts, but they were only stayed on the gaming table, not published with a published company, etc. There were some attempts. I created also my system, not to publish, but to also run. But the popular was Dungeons and Dragons mostly. And the attempts was to translating the beginner set, the player's handbook, and also Hasbro translated Dungeons and Dragons board game. There were some stores also. First of all, Sihir, one of them is in Beşiktaş in Istanbul. It was one of the main stores in that time, and also some others like Geçit Cafe and Kayıp, Ansalon. There were some cafes in that time, but mostly they're like a coffee style, Everybody is going there to get a coffee or tea or to eat a sandwich, but we are going there to meet other people to share our hobbies. So we were playing board games and we were talking about Warhammer miniatures and our role-playing memories. It was like that. In that time, there were few, mostly in Istanbul and one or two in Izmir and Ankara. So that's all. There were few these days, but mostly they were known people that share RPG hobbies or get into fantasy stuff. In the beginning of 2000 also, there were some university communities. There were lots, by the way, mostly in Istanbul and Ankara. And they were spending so much time and great efforts to tell what is RPG, what is tabletop gaming to lots of students. And for example, the most popular and one of the oldest one is Metukon, organized by ODTÜ in Ankara. It was the oldest and one of the biggest conventions in Turkey. And after 2002 or 3, lots of universities did their own conventions and hundreds of people going there and playing role-playing games, tabletop games, even cosplays and live-action role-playings. It was very cool. But after that, coming to our near time, mostly everything gone online. I can see that lots of people are meeting on Discord or somewhere else, so they were playing online. And nowadays, there are less conventions than before. And also, there are few cafes than before. So most people are connecting via social media or some community platforms or small groups in Facebook or somewhere else. So mostly they were reaching each other via Zoom or Skype, etc. And they are playing the games online mostly. So there are less communities and less conventions and less stores and RPG cafes right now. By the way, it could be about the culture, you need to know English to play and learn, etc. because the books are all in English or in other languages. But in Turkey, lots of people may speak in English, but the culture about the fantasy and the science fiction is not so old. It started after, I may say, Lord of the Rings trilogy movies. It started after 2000. So not every people got into it. Mostly the teenagers got into it, but they weren't spending so much time on it. For example, the economic crisis and the economic situation in Turkey blocks it because, you need to buy some stuff, you need to buy books, supplements, dice, etc., 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 and you need to pay with dollars or euros, etc. So you need to spend some money, you need to spend your time, and you need to read the books, you need to, you need to do lots of things, but everybody has different things on their mind, so they can't spend so much time, I guess. And also, opening a cafe or a store is also another economical situation. You need to earn money. You need to make a profit from that. But only few people going there to play tabletop games, and they are not spending any money. They're just sitting all day and only drinking one glass of cola or water. And they're spending all the day. They are blocking the table for all day. So it's non-profitable, by the way. By the way, I remember in 2001, I was also in Kocaeli University. We went to the teachers and we told that we wanted to start a club in university, student club. They said, it's about what? We said, it's about fantasy and science fiction. And they told us, I won't allow you to start a club with the fantasy name in it. So get away. Because they understood the fantasy is like a sexual fantasy or something like this. They said, go away. I don't need it, and I don't want you to do that. Just go away. And then many years later, they just build it up.
And now for a premiere. Since I live in Istanbul, I took a ferry to a startup hub in Eminönü on the European side to do an interview in person. Metis Creative is a company that did a very successful Kickstarter for their D&D 5e supplement Historica Arcanum City of Crescent last year. Full disclosure, I backed that Kickstarter, even though I don't even play D&D, the setting was just so intriguing. And to be honest here, I haven't had the chance to fully read the book, but I can tell you that it has a layout that fully supports the mood of the setting, and also absolutely fantastic artwork throughout the book. If you're listening to this podcast when it comes out, you might also still have a chance to participate in their second Kickstarter for Historica Arcanum Empires of the Silk Road. The campaign ends on October 10th, 2022. It's weird to say that year, but who knows when you're listening to this. This second project is actually 2 books, and while I'm recording this, which is September 27th, 2022, they have already gathered more than $150,000 via crowdfunding. So quite a successful campaign here. And here are Sarp and Doa from Metis Creative.
Hello, whoever is listening. I'm Sarp. I am one of the founders of Metis Creative. I handle mostly the boring stuff, the business part. And I got to role-playing some 3-4 years ago, actually, so I'm quite newcomer when I was in college. And, fast forward 2 years and I got this project, and here we are.
Hey, my name is Doa. I'm the creative director of the Metis Creative, and I usually handle the fun stuff in this case. And I'm also pretty a new player into the TTRPGs. I started off with D&D, and I started 1.5 years ago. When I was really the first time that I was played was with Sarp. We were just planning our new project. And I was really eager because I needed to learn in order to write it. So that's how I started.
It started off as a
Pulp
joke,
comedy.
a joke from a pulp comedy movie. That at least for me, I was watching this comedy movie from this Turkish comedian, which was about 2 Victorian era Ottoman officers going to the Wild West America to send off an important gift to the American president. And at that point, something clicked in me and said, hey, wouldn't it be super fun if we had a D&D setting book / adventure that is set in 19th century Istanbul? And, that idea kind of slowly died there, but then I began to realize that there's actually this huge market for tabletop products. I saw this massive success of tabletop RPG products on Kickstarter, and I said, I'm interested in game design, I'm interested in role-playing games, and I think this production can be handled by this, 20-year-old me. And that's how I got in, actually. It was like a double-edged sword. At one side, I thought it was a good business opportunity, and at this point, I think it is. It allowed us to build this company. And second part, I think it was a good creative decision because nothing like 19th century Istanbul fantasy existed, at least for international audience. And I think, we could bring something like that.
Yeah, I was not really into high fantasy. Stuff like the Lord of the Rings universe was not really grabbing my attention because, I just, as a genre, I don't really like high fantasy things. But when I realized that there's really a lot more than that in TTRPGs, I was invested.
So could you say a bit more about the book, about the setting also?
So Historical Arcanum uses Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition mechanics as its core gameplay engine, but then we took the D&D and essentially rewrote the fantasy trope so it fits this alternate history universe. The idea behind Historical Arcanum is that it's not just Istanbul of 19th century, but it is the entire world history that can be played and that has secrets of arcane origin, that has monsters lurking in the shadows, that has magicians secretly controlling the world history as it marches on and whatnot. And after we created this universe and set its basic rules, we said, okay, now we're taking a deeper dive into this one very specific location and timeline, and that's how Historic Arcanum, the City of Crescent, was born. Essentially, D&D, alternate history, and Victorian era Istanbul.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty much we explain the things that happened in history with arcane. That's the basic tagline of the Historic Arcanum universe because, a lot happened in history that we don't seem to understand, with diplomacy and wars and stuff. So a lot was going on in there, and I think it's a really fun idea to just look back and say, oh, that looks like a blah blah spell, and that looks like a god emperor, and that looks like this. So when you just put something out that people already know through history, through books, and through their history classes in high school, and explain it with magic and stuff, they already know how the thing works because they know what Ottomans looked like back then. It's not this brand new idea, but they now have a chance to go into the Ottoman Empire, go into the capital of the Ottoman Empire, and like have an adventure there. And that probably doesn't alienate them. Like they don't need to learn a lot of stuff before going in. And when they go there, they just know like the basics of the universe. I think that's really like a good thing for a newcomer, because they know what to do. They know how to talk to people. They know like you can't be disrespectful to this, and like in Istanbul there is like 3 main nationalities and like 5 religions living together. All right, I know how to deal with it and stuff. So I think that's like a good starting point for newcomers as well. And especially the book is story-wise takes the players to Istanbul with this ship, and then they realize that Istanbul has a lot of burden going on in there. They have this new sultan who has a different approach than the previous sultans. And Istanbul is on the verge of change, and our players alter the change, and like they choose their path in Istanbul. It's really hard to say something without spoiling it. So I'm just gonna stop myself there.
The one thing that I want to say is like when we were picking up with this project, I was going through a lot of like game designer, game developer conferences, and one thing that I was hooked on was Sid Meier's talk about essentially the post-mortem of Civilization series. And one thing that he said resonated with me a lot is like they were looking for ideas for their new game, and what they did to broaden the scope and not alienate players and make sure they had a cool enough concept is to just make a very broad idea that they can sprinkle details as they go in. And they said, okay, what's the broadest idea? Human history. And that's how the entire Civilization series was born. And that's kind of where we got the idea of having this very broad universe, Historica Arcanum. And in here we said, okay, and that's what we're doing right now after we move on from City of Crescent. Is okay, now we have the entire human history in front of us. Let's find out, the gems that we find really interesting. It was 19th century Istanbul then, now it is 13th century Silk Road, and who knows what it will be in the future.
Since you're both Turkish and this is in Istanbul, why publish it in English and not in Turkish?
A couple of reasons. Do you want to go first or should I?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first things first, we needed to do this in English because, otherwise there will be like a really, really, really niche group in Turkey that you need to sell. And it's not possible to sell like a really niche book to only Turks because, otherwise we wouldn't be able to fund this company. It will just be a passion project if we just did it in Turkish. Like we wouldn't have any economic goals with that. So that's the main reason why we did it in English. And the second reason is we are really actually passionate about bringing up Turkish history, like this Ottoman history, to people who foreigners that lives in abroad. And because, I think most of the culture and the history of Eurasia, the Middle East, and the other countries are really not out there in especially in TTRPG, because it's mostly high fantasy, Middle Earth stuff, and a little bit of Vikings. Yeah. And that's pretty much about it.
Yeah, and when you think about it, most of the big publishers are all Western European, American publishers. So kudos to them to bring up amazing products. But what we wanted to do is to bring some, cultural authenticity to creating this new world. That's why, for instance, we are targeting at least, for the first maybe 5-10 products of Historic Arcanum, regions and the cultures and the historical periods that we have significant cultural authority over. And what's more important is I think it is tabletop RPGs and games in general are great mediums to introduce people to new cultures. Because what you do as a game developer, what you do as a creative is you specifically create the sandbox where you generate the characters, you generate the setting, you generate the stories. And that way, if you are careful about it, if you are willing to, you can, detach all the stereotypes and create cultural, authentic, and actually meaningful stories that takes players into this journey that go beyond just being theme parks. You have this term in designing MMO games. The MMO game either has very significant gameplay options that sets them apart, or they are quote unquote theme park MMOs. Theme park MMOs, they just tend to have let's make a Star Wars MMO. It's just like any other MMO but with a Star Wars skin on top. Let's make a World of Warcraft MMO, Warcraft MMO. It's just an MMO with a Warcraft skin on top. So we could have went that route and we could have just made a base story that most adventures just pick up on, but we just said, okay, you know what, we're going to do a cultural deep dive too as we write this book. And I think it is going to be meaningful to foreign audiences. Like our audience is 99% foreign that haven't been to Turkey at all. And I think it paid off. People are very happy about City of Crescent because it does not only give them a story, it gives them a guide on how to play in Istanbul or DM in Istanbul. And obviously we could have done better, but I think it's a good start.
And there are like even more bigger examples. I mean, look at Witcher.
Yeah, exactly.
That's like the closest thing to European culture myth, but they're like almost identical from the other Slavic mythologies and stuff. But it's still authentic because that was something that they didn't see before, and they just loved it. And Witcher is like a really big brand right now, like as a story and like as a world building.
From story to world building to even music, there's a really like a solid setting there. I think we try to do the same thing. Obviously, we don't have the technical capacities that CD Projekt Red did, but on the grounds that we had power and capacity over game design, writing, artworks, and even music, we tried to put our best foot forward.
And Witcher was really successful, obviously, but like I think the reason they're big just because they just put something out which has like strict connections with their mythology, and everybody thought that's really authentic, that's really beautiful, that's original, something we didn't see before, and that's Polish mythology.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
That's really close to them. So like we just brought up something even more bizarre for them.
And you also have recipes in the book.
Oh yeah,
Maybe say
that we can't cook.
Can you say something about this idea?
I mean. I think that's like the main reason is immersion, obviously. Because when you sit somewhere for 4 hours, 5 hours, you obviously end up eating something. So and we just thought, why not eat Turkish food instead, like popcorns or like peanuts and stuff. So we just wanted to create since we already made the book, since we already write the story, since we already recorded the music, why not another sense can't be involved? And we ended up writing recipes there.
Exactly.
And I think we're both really big fans of like the Turkish cuisine, so we just want to share that. We talked about like doing a modern era, especially we talked about doing Cold War maybe. And
my pet peeve is Cold War.
And I mean D&D has some supplements that you can change to play in the present day. But I kind of like the mystic feeling of playing in history. So I think we would visit a lot of places before we end up in like modern days. I think because but we lose the nostalgic and mystic feeling.
Absolutely. But let me say this one thing: that is for like what Doğa said is for Historic Arcanum, specifically D&D supplement. We have in works a lot of not in works, but like a lot of ideas about what we would want to do in future, and a couple of them end up being interesting murder mystery /
we are dying for like
exactly.
Detective noir game.
Yeah, exactly. So, if we think now it's the time, we have the capacity and we have the, time for it, maybe we would just go and create a somewhat of our own system where you can play in the present day. But that would be a bit far away from the world of Historic Arcanum. That is to be fair, moving Historic Arcanum to a whole new system would be a huge leap, because then you are making all the previous games kind of obsolete.
There are two barriers that you need to cross before handing out the final product. One of them is writing in another language. That's a big issue. Even if we try to do our best when we are speaking in English, I think we are doing an okay job when we are communicating in English and stuff. But writing is a whole other thing. Our vision was like this: we are gonna write as best as we can. We are gonna get really good at writing. But even if you write really detailed and really focused, we still need to employ an editor who's a native English speaker who's gonna check the things. So we did that separately, and we wanted to do as much as playtesting possible. And we just went full on with Turkish because we can obviously reach more people in Turkish. This is where all in Istanbul and stuff. So we did this playtesting separately. One of them was the completely theoretical on the book, because our editor was also this amazing DM. So he playtested in his mind, but he also looked it up in English and edited it in English. But we didn't involve the playtesting part, the English part in playtesting. We had one of the tables in English, which we didn't plan.
So that surprised me that you are in a co-working space as a startup, and I've never seen that in the RPG industry. So how come?
A couple of reasons. First up is my background and Oz background and our co-workers and like partners backgrounds are not the usual let's write an RPG book backgrounds.
Yeah.
Like I come from venture capitalist firms as a director, and like we have all the people from like different industries, finance, academy, again, fine arts and whatnot, and even law. And what we decide is that we are going to take this entire journey very seriously. This is not just a passion project, but the start of a company that hopefully will be a big publisher. So what we did is, okay, we're going to take ourselves seriously. We're going to get a proper office with like good facilities.
I mean, we tried couch writing.
Oh, that was horrible.
And like that didn't work out so well because first of all, we want to deliver the books like as quick as possible because we had all these different projects that we want to do, and we really want to satisfy the audience as well. So when you're working from home, when you're like RPG books are like a lot of work. There is a lot of people like working in there. A lot of artists, a lot of writers, and like other writers were having a hard time to communicate. The artists were like having a hard time to understand the brief because when there's 3 writers writing like this monster or this section or this scene, all the artists get kind of confused because they all had different visions for that scene. But when you're in like this 10 square feet room and discussing the scene, they just understand it way better and like they put it way better. And I always think like if you can put out like the 40%, 35% of what you think to the end product, you're really successful at it. I mean, because usually the rate is like in my mind is like 10-20%. You just cut out the pieces that just get dissolved when you're communicating with someone. So when you just remove that, you end up with like a better product. And like we just want to remove that like confusion, like it just fades out and the writings fade out in like the phone calls or the Zoom calls. So like we wanted to do like a better job in communicating with each other, and that happened with like Office.
And I think like it's in the eyes of us and every person that we work with, it allows them to imagine this as not just as I said, a passion project, but a full-on job. Like, have you seen some of our artworks that our artists did? Like, it's unbelievable, and it wouldn't have happened if they didn't see this as their full-time job that they would go from 9 to 5 from.
I was on the phone with one of our artists yesterday, and I said like we had this successful project and like we're moving to this, and like she just stopped for a second and said like I can't believe that the message that I got from you guys, who like sounded completely like fake like a money laundering project to this full-fledged corporation, she was like, that's amazing, good job guys. And I was like, yeah, that sounded like that.
Because, like when I first started the project, I didn't know any artists, so I had to go to Twitter and started like texting every artist I saw that had like some that had a good portfolio, saying, "Oh, hey, here is an idea. Would you be interested in working with us?"
that sounds really fake.
Yeah, that sounds really fake.
So thank you for listening to The World of RPGs. A special thanks goes out to the Turkish gamers who talked to me, Sarp Doğa, Berfin, Kaira and Metin. The music was Battle of the Dragons by Thomas Muzio. And also, since this was the Turkey episode, let's not forget the creator of the channel's logo, Ayber Karakaş, who is one of Berfin's design colleagues. As always, you can find a link to his work and the work of any other person who was involved in this episode in the show notes. What you can also find in the show notes is a link to another podcast, Asians Represent. That is a podcast by 2 Asian Canadians, Agatha Cheng and David Kwan, who discuss representation of Asians in role-playing games and related media. And with Asia, they mean every part of the continent, from Istanbul to Tokyo. There's somewhat of a focus on Asians living in North America, but they also interview creators and players in Asian countries. So if this channel is not enough, also try Asians Represent. But in the meanwhile, subscribe to The World of RPGs wherever you get your podcasts, rate and review. And We're waiting for episode 6. Now, for the last Western Asian country, we return to a session of Dungeons and Dragons. So let's see if you can find out where this excerpt is from.
סמסין הגוטל עדיין שמה?
הוא מרחף מאחוריכם במעגלים באקסטאזה מהלחש שהוא עכשיו השלים. רוח קרירה מנשבת. ועכשיו, כשהירח הכחול ענן מכסה אותו, אתם יכולים לראות שצד שמאל של גופך, את מרגישה קצת מוזר, מין איזשהו עקצוץ, ואתם רואים שיד שמאל שלה, שאוחזת באחד מהפטישיים, האור הפך להיות קצת חטטורתי, האצבעות הפכו לטלפיים קלות. אתם לא בטוחים כמה אצבעות יש לה ביד שמאל עכשיו, זה כל פעם שאתם מנסים לספור, זה משהו שם מרצד ומשתנה, אבל חוץ מזה הכל בסדר.
קפטן בזלת, אני לא מרגישה כל כך טוב.
כן, קפטן בזלת מעולף, ואתם שומעים אותו מאמן, הספינה שלי.
מה? בזלת זה אני.
לא, הקפטן שלה, לא קפטן בזלת, הקפטן של הספינה.
סליחה, לא צריך מר בזלת.
איפה הספינה?
היא תקועה על אחד מהעזיזים שלה.
הדרגון כרגע, הוא לא עף, נכון? הוא צף במים? הוא פשוט צף?
הוא מנמנם?
חוץ מההל שיש את הדבר הזה ביד, מה המצב, כאילו...
עם מה שאת מרגישה.
אבל אנחנו עדיין על המים.
כן.
אוקיי.
אני יכול לבדוק את היד שלך ולהבין מה קרה, אני בודק את היד, בדיקת רפואה אני חושב, לגלגל קוף 20.
ולגלגל, בהחלט. הרפואה אתה רוצה?
20
טבעי. אוקיי. התחלנו עם 20 טבעי. יפה מאוד. יפה מאוד, זה סימן מצוין לבאות. אתה בודק את היד שלה?
ובודק את כולה למען, שם נופל לי קצת האסימון, כאילו כל הזוהר הכחלחל הזה, כאילו אולי תהיו עליה כללה, לא יודע, בודק...
אתה חושב. אתה בודק את היד שלה, ויש, טוב, עם 20 טבעי, יש כמה דברים שאתה בטוח בהם. אחד, זוהי לא יד של בן אדם.